All right, this is the first episode of Welcome to Turkville. My name's Johnny. This is Alex. Alex, kind of tell me a little bit about yourself. I know that I know about you, but some of our kinfolk may not.
Well, grew up right here in Sumter, so born and raised right here. Didn't go anywhere else. Ended up basically going to Lakewood High School. So we didn't go to the same area usually as most of the other Turks, because most of them are usually in the Dazelle area. But we grew up on the other side of town.
That's where Hillcrest, man.
Yeah, and so we ended up going to high school over at Lakewood, and then ended up doing college, going that route. But we were first gen, and so the first in our family on our side to go. And so ended up bouncing around from Central Carolina to Warrior Georgetown, then finishing off and got my associates here at USC Sumter, got my bachelor's at USC Upstate, got my master's at USC Aiken, and now I'm doing a doctoral program at Liberty University.
Very
and so
cool.
trying to finish that up, but just grateful and thankful and blessed to be able to do all that.
I was similar to you, to where first gen, kind of out of college. I did Fruitland Baptist College, as you knew, and my associates there. Still working on my bachelor's for Southeastern. Still got about 7 more classes to go with that, but
Not too far off.
Not too far, but it's far enough.
It's far enough.
It's far enough to where I've got to get back into it and get back in the groove.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I can finish up with that, man, that would be good.
Oh yeah.
So we've got 2 very humbling women that were involved in our lives. My grandmother, Lillie Benenhaley, and your grandmother,
Laura.
Laura. So the main thing that I know that we kind of want to talk about is things that actually went on between our lives that were very similar, because they were almost like best friends.
Correct.
So the way they grew up, the way that they actually were with one another whenever we were growing up, because it's going to be our story for right now.
Right.
And I know that maybe my sister and your brother, your mom may want to actually, tune in and chime in some more about your grandma. And I know my sister would probably want to talk more about my grandmother as well. But those are their stories. We're going to talk about our stories that we've gone through and what we've seen. Some of the craziness, some of the crazy stories even too. I do have some questions for you. Earliest memory of your grandmother?
Probably the earliest I have is somewhere around the 3 to 4 range, and it was probably one of the early Christmases I can remember, and it was just basically going over to Grandma's house and coming in, and everybody was over there. So it was my grandma, it was my papa, it was all my uncles, and stuff just like everywhere. It was the old school tree with like the old school lights and the tinsel in it and everything else.
Not only the old school feel though.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of family there and just.
Yeah. It was something, and that's just something I miss, because I don't know. It's just like you go over there and do stuff now, but it's not the same.
No, it's not.
So.
And especially with ours, I mean, it was about the same. I mean, I remember that first Christmas that I can just think of being over at their house as early memory, and that was Christmas.
Yeah.
Grandma loved Christmas a lot, and she loved being able to put up a tree. We still have her tree actually that Jamie and I use.
Okay.
So it's a pretty cool experience, and I remember actually with Dad putting together my first turtle van.
There you go.
And that was actually at right in front of the TV, where the front room is. As soon as you come in there, you turn left and you see just the TV just sitting there, and it was one of those stand-up units.
Yeah.
And Cliff used to sit in front of it. And I remember that. I remember sitting with my dad and just putting it together, putting the stickers on there, and it was a cool experience with not only that with Dad, but just seeing Grandma, and I could picture it in my head that where she's just making sure everybody's fine. She's getting all the presents ready. It's right after we've ate lunch, and it's just, and you can see the joy in her face that all and the kids and grandkids are there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, man, just like you said, it's just a different feeling now, because, I mean, you don't really have the ones there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the best memories with her? How about that?
I'd say it could be a couple of different things. I think one of my favorite overall memories, and it isn't necessarily just particular for just her in per se, but it's more so just being over at Grandma's house. And it was when we would get together, go fishing down at Aunt Molly's Pond, as they called it. And it was I guess it was the lady's house that was right down the road off of Bruindon, but there was a pond down there. And we would go fishing over there. And so we would do is we would all get in the truck, and Papa's little old red Nissan, and we'd pile in the back of the truck, and we drive over there, and we go fishing in that pond, and we catch all the brim. And then when we would catch all the fish, we'd put them in the buckets, in 5-gallon buckets, and then we'd put the buckets in the back of the truck. And then Papa would take the truck and go back to the house, and then we'd all walk back. So we'd all walk back to the house.
Man, forget y'all. I'm just going to drive on back.
Yeah.
You can't even ride in the back of my truck.
So, yeah. And so, well, we had a couple buckets. And so, nobody was going to fit back there, but we would all just walk back. And then by the time we got back, Grandma was already in there cooking it up. So, like, by the time we got back, Papa had already taken the fish and then rinsed them off and cleaned them. So he'd already cut the heads off and gutted them and all that, scaled them and all that. And they had like this assembly line. And so he would go in there, and by the time we got back, they would help finish cleaning them, and then Grandma would be inside and battering up, putting everything in it, and then frying them up. And so that was probably one of my favorite memories. And it was funny is that, like, our mama never wanted us to eat the fish because she didn't particularly like fish.
She didn't?
And so anything that she didn't like, she didn't think anybody else would like. But
Come on, Miss Libby.
Yeah.
Come
and I
on
was
now.
just like, no. But what Grandma would do is she would take the fish and peel it apart and try to almost fillet it, so that way there were no bones in it.
Okay.
And so Mama was always like, you'll choke on the bones, this and that. But Grandma would still let us eat it. And so she would try to pick it out so that way we could still, because we wanted to eat it. I mean,
Well,
I love fish.
That was something similar with our grandmothers, huh?
Mhm.
I mean, especially that one story you always tell me about my grandma with.
Yeah.
So tell me that story real quick before we go into more.
So that story in particular is when we would have the Lord's Supper at Long Branch, they would end up, after it was over, they would have the leftover grape juice.
Yeah.
And they would have it in the little containers or whatever, and instead of them just pouring it out, they would let us come in there and they would let us just drink it. And somebody had got on them one time about us coming in there and doing that, and they said the same thing. They were like, "Well, they're just gonna go down the drain anyway. Like, why are we wasting it? And so, and I'm pretty sure Lillie said that to John Mark one day.
More than likely, more than likely, they it was like it was a fun but loving and sometimes crazy environment with those two.
Yeah.
But it was a great environment because of the way that we grew up, man. And I just exactly what you were saying about best memories. I can think of Grandma especially. What she would do is they would get green beans from over at Putchie Boys, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
Those Putchie Boy used to actually grow. I think it was green beans that used to grow, and she would always peel them. She would always snap them and everything too, making sure that they were good. And she'd have that bowl and just do that. And that was probably about 10 o'clock in the morning when she would do that. Sometimes she would do them at night, but mainly about 10 o'clock in the morning, she would do that right after she had finished with the clothes. Because what she would do is she would wash Cliff's and Papa's clothes probably about 9 o'clock in the morning, right after she had finished with breakfast and everything for everybody. And man, it was, I remember that to a T, because what she would do is she would hum as she was actually folding her clothes.
Mm-hmm.
She would always hum two different ones. The main one I remember though is In the Garden. She would actually hum, and she would just, and you could tell she definitely loved the Lord. And that was just over and over and over again, to where she was doing things like that that showed me that she had a heart that just was just of gold, except for whenever she had to tell off good old John Mark.
Yep.
That's all of us though. We all need to be told off every so often. But man, it was those memories, and I could say one of the fondest memories that we would have every Saturday. It was pretty much almost every Saturday, like clockwork. Mom would get Nikki and I up. Sometimes you wouldn't have to because Nikki would be so upset at me because I'd be watching cartoons, sometimes starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. And what we would do is all of us would go to Grandma's, pick up Grandma probably about 11 o'clock. We would go to, and this was pretty much every Saturday, we would go to Burger King first because both my mom and her loved Burger King. And the other thing that we would do was go to Kmart. Grandma would walk around Kmart for hours upon hours, and we didn't know why until Nikki and I got a little bit older. And what she would do is she would get Mom to of course, especially around Christmas time or our birthday, to look for our presents. Grandma didn't make a lot, of course. She had basically Social Security coming in, and what she would do is save her money for us, basically to give us our gifts. And that's what she did, is she put her money aside each month. And not knowing that during that time, man, it breaks my heart now. Just to be able to think of that and to know that pretty much almost every Saturday she would do that. Of course, she'd buy little things here and there for herself, like little earring sets or just like little watches here and there, things, but it was always on sale. It was never
full price.
Yes, never full price. They loved that little blue light special that used to come on for Kmart. But
did she call it Kmart or Kmark?
Sometimes it was Kmart, but she knew the T that was on there.
I don't know if Grandma ever knew that, but she sure called it Kmark.
She would
never
do
called
this.
it Kmart.
She would do this though.
Kmark.
She would put the in front of everything. I get at my wife about it because my wife does it too. She'll say the Facebook or the Walmart, and Grandma used to do that same thing. The Kmart. So it would be like that. And I mean, Cliff went with us from time to time, but it was always Grandma.
Yeah.
Grandma went with us a lot. So that just reminds me of so much more. Funny stories of her. Can you tell me any of the funny stories that might have been of your grandmother?
I mean, there's a couple, but
one that you could tell.
I'm trying to think. Well, I could say there was somebody in particular. I ain't gonna say who it was, but either way, it was one evening, and you know, they always like being prepared if anybody was going to be coming over or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, had to straighten up and all that, even though nothing was really needing straighten up.
And their houses, no, man. Nothing had to be straightened up at that time.
And so, but there was one particular day somebody had just pulled up, and I go up there, and Papa was like, "Son, who's that out there just pulled up at there in the yard?" And I looked, and I said, "It's so-and-so." And Papa said a cuss word, and then Grandma said, "Who's that out there?" And Papa said who it was, and she did the same exact thing and cussed. And, you know, that's the kitchen words, as they call it.
The kitchen words.
Kitchen words. And it was funny because they was complaining the whole time. You know, just doing stuff like that. But then soon as they walked in, "Man, y'all come on in the house now. Y'all sit down," you know.
But yes,
that
is hilarious.
The kitchen words is what they call it.
I will say that Grandma, one of the main things that I think that was just hilarious of her was something that you were a part of. And it may sound crazy, but man, every time I could think about it, anytime that one person showed up on the television, one person, Victor Newman, she would always start chewing him out. That scoundrel! That scoundrel! And man, it was notorious. Right after, Price is Right. Of course, the news came on, and then right after the news, you hear that
piano playing.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yep.
And I'm just like, no.
Yep.
Now, Johnny, now you go to sleep, okay?
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep during that, man.
No.
She's sitting here, that scoundrel. I can't stand him. He's just always doing something negative. Man, it's bad. But man, it was not only that, when she would do that fuss at the TV, right afterwards, because it played from 12:30 until 1:30, and man, right afterwards, I would try to be asleep, but she would call, and she would start off with the other phone that was cordless phone. But as soon as she would actually pick up the cordless phone, she'd realize Johnny's not asleep. She would go in that other room, in that back room, and call your grandmother. And you probably were there too. You were probably at home during that time with her. And man, the conversations they would have about that. And then just the funny part about the whole entire situation is that Papa started off not liking it. And he started just reading the paper. And that's how he would do things. But man, both of them would actually start screaming at the TV at the top of their lungs.
Really?
And it was hilarious. We just kind of talked about it a little bit, but the closeness between our grandmothers and the bond that they had as friends. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and see, for me, I didn't get to or see as much because I was a little bit younger. But the main thing that I noticed is the amount of things that they did together while they were at church. And, the doing the stuff with the Lord's Supper or anything else, or cleaning up the church, all kinds of different things like that. But it was always them hanging out.
Yes.
And so, and again, I never got to be in a lot of those conversations when they were going on, but I always saw them together.
Yes.
And so I knew they were close, but I guess, even younger, and I kind of am resentful with myself a little bit because it's like I didn't realize necessarily what I was missing out on. And so now you see a lot of the posts where it's like on Facebook, and it's like, the kids that are complaining about having to go home with their family and everything else. It's like, y'all need to enjoy this because like you don't realize how much you're going to miss that.
Yeah, it was something that I can definitely look back on and that I did. I did that while I was gone for those 10 years. Whenever I was gone for Turkville and doing a lot of youth ministry, I took advantage pretty much of the family that I had during that time period, and I can say that. And it does hurt because if you don't spend the time that you have now with them, well, you won't get it back.
Yeah.
And that I can definitely say that I won't get that back. And I know you feel the same way too.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
that you kind of feel, just like you said, resentful towards it, towards yourself almost.
Yeah.
Because of the things that we were young and naive about what we know now. And it's all about what we know now.
Yeah, because I feel like we take it for granted. That's why even I did chuckle the other day when I posted the thing on Facebook about the stories, because it was, as soon as I put it on there, all the Turks were commenting.
Oh yeah.
And all the cousins are like, your grandma did it too? And I was like, yeah. It's like,
Yes.
it was a standard.
It was definitely a standard.